I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship, the season of dreams.
So JUCK over with Menace to Sports.
And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. The Ohio State Buckeyes, the 2024 national champs, will be remembered for how they came out of that. And welcome to JUCK on Bucks. Appreciate you so much for joining me as the coaching wheel turns for the Ohio State Buckeyes. It seems pretty clear that Jim Knowles did a real good job of disguising his unhappiness at Ohio State, because he wasn't happy towards the end there, clearly. Now that he has moved on to Penn State, there's some things coming out. One of these things is an article I want to go over today. But it appeared at the end there that Ohio State was, in fact, trying to work with him. They offered him a $2.7 million deal. Penn State offered $3.1 million. Notre Dame and Oklahoma, $3 million. And, you know, that's a big raise that Ohio State was offering him, a $500,000 raise up from 2.2. That is showing him, after he just signed an extension last offseason, that they want to keep him. And you expect kind of a hometown discount. So it was clear that Ryan Day wanted to continue this relationship with Jim Knowles, or he wouldn't have told Ross Bjork, yes, let's go. We want to keep him. Go ahead and make him an offer. So Ryan Day wanted to make things right, whatever was going wrong. And it's pretty clear that Jim Knowles didn't. So Brandon Marcello, formerly a very respected journalist here on JUCK on Bucks, until in the middle of the Ohio State celebration after winning the national championship, about an hour after the game, in the locker room, he went up to Carnell Tate and tweeted, I asked Carnell Tate what his thoughts were about entering the transfer portal, and, quote, he just smiled and said, I'm going to celebrate with my teammates. Now, clearly, Marcello did that to kick off a crap storm, which then happened with Carnell Tate, and I don't like it. I don't like that kind of thing. So he's got a long way to go before he attains JUCK on Bucks Journalist of the Year status, which his colleague Brad Crawford won in 2024 for putting JUCK on Bucks in a 24/7 article. Flattery gets you everywhere. So Brad Crawford, the winner. Marcello got a way to go, but Marcello writes this article for CBS, and he starts it off. Now, this is some home cooking here, this article. This is clearly a very slanted article, clearly from an insider source that he does not name, but someone who is close to the Knowles camp. So it starts off, Jim Knowles' defense is not static and certainly malleable to suggestions, but even a veteran coach has a breaking point with directives. The coordinator reached his limit after 3 years at Ohio State, where he successfully revamped and revitalized a struggling unit into a championship caliber group in short order, but not without interference and pressures from head coach Ryan Day, who inserted himself in defensive meetings more often this season and asked for changes to be made midway through the season, sources told CBS last week. Okay, so Ryan Day inserts himself after the Oregon game and asks for changes to be made. And apparently that's an issue with Jim Knowles, according to these sources. That's something. Marcello goes on. Knowles polished the Silver Bullets into the nation's best defense at 12.9 points per game, but did so rebuilding the unit over 3 years with the understanding that mixing his three-man front schemes would never be a hallmark in Columbus. The crux was longtime defensive line coach Larry Johnson, whose four-man front philosophies are ingrained in the Buckeyes culture. It was Knowles, not the Buckeyes, who had to adjust philosophically. That didn't necessarily eliminate Knowles' three-man looks and mixing coverages, but his love of utilizing a jack hybrid on and off the line was never a touchstone like it previously was at Oklahoma State or Duke. All right. A few things here. Yes, Knowles had to adjust philosophically when he came to Ohio State. And yes, he did so with the understanding that he couldn't do it with a three-man front. I think it's important to note that this was not a case of Ryan Day gets Jim Knowles here and says to him, oh, by the way, we're going to be running a four-man front exclusively because that's what my defensive line coach wants to do, and that's what we've recruited for. Jim Knowles knew this going into it. And I feel like there's an insinuation in this article that that's not the case, but that was definitely the case. Jim Knowles took this job to move up the career coaching ladder. You can't take the job knowing the circumstances, knowing what you're walking into, and then when you leave the situation, bash it. Now, you can disagree with not being allowed to run your whole philosophy, then don't take the job. You took the job knowing it ahead of time, and now you want to whine about it. I don't really like it. As for hiring a defensive coordinator, limiting what he can do because of what the defensive line coach likes to do, I've made this clear before. I think it was a mistake by Ryan Day. I understand why he did it. Larry Johnson, been there longer than Ryan Day, widely respected as the greatest defensive line coach ever. And that's the way he does things. And that's how he's recruited his defensive line. But he's a position coach. And Ryan Day, the entire time Jim Knowles was here, called him the head coach of the defense. But it was clear that the head coach of the defense wasn't really the boss of the defense. So I think it was a mistake. I still think it's a mistake. But Ryan Day corrected it midway through the year when he made some changes with the defense. And I think that was the right thing to do. I don't think it'll ever be an issue again, whether Larry Johnson stays on for 2025 or not. I think this is part of the evolution that we've seen with Ryan Day. If this was going to bother Knowles, he shouldn't have taken the job. And I also think that Ryan Day shouldn't have hamstrung him. I think there's a little culpability with both parties here. The article continues. Meanwhile, Day's appearances in the defensive meeting room increased after the Buckeyes' 32-31 loss to Oregon. But what made this development more personal and political was Day's background as an offensive coordinator. As Day left mentor Chip Kelly on his own to develop game plans on the offensive side, it was the veteran defensive coordinator who instead had to deal with the boss breathing down his neck. Now that's something, isn't it? That defensive performance, man. Now, Day's general week included working with Chip Kelly to develop the game plan. So you go out to Oregon, and the defensive game plan, there was a lot of reasons to be embarrassed about it. There was a lot of correctable things, easily correctable things, guys not being lined up, the defense totally gassed, no rotation, defensive backs playing undisciplined, poorly executed simulated pressures. All those things happened out at Oregon. And Day told those defensive guys that will never happen again. He said that in a press conference. That will never happen again. So he has this embarrassing defensive performance, goes into the defensive meetings and says, listen, guys, orders from headquarters, we're going to do things different. And then he continued to monitor to make sure what he wanted done was being implemented. That's a head coach's responsibility. I get it that Jim Knowles likes to sit locked in his office and not be bothered. And that works when everything's going great. Things were not going great after that Oregon game. And that's just part of your job, dude. To have an issue with that, that's really something, man. That's really something to me. Anyway, something I don't think Ryan Day would have done in the past. This is part of his evolution as a coach. And I think this is, look, if that doesn't happen, if Ryan Day doesn't step in, do they win the national championship? No. So kudos to him. I'm sure it wasn't easy. He saw the opportunity to go make a couple things right, and he did it. And that's awesome. So good on him. Evolution as a head coach. If Knowles got his feelings hurt, which he clearly did, oh well. Marcelo continues. That didn't mix well with Knowles' Lone Ranger attitude. The Cornell graduate, who also got his coaching start in the Ivy League, not your typical play caller. He enjoys cigars and sushi and is quite the reflective intellectual. Dude, this sounds like the fiance feeding Marcelo this information. If you're like, honestly, come on now. Are you kidding me? It goes on. Shortly after the national championship game on January 20th, Knowles 59 began fielding calls from suitors. The flirtations led to counteroffers from Ohio State. And though their pitches were in the same payday ranges discussed with Oklahoma and Penn State, there was a caveat. The caveat was, if you don't commit now to the Buckeyes, you will be barred from the team's national championship celebration inside Ohio Stadium on January 26th. At that point, negotiations broke down with Knowles, who already had one foot out the door. So they're in the middle of the negotiation, right? He's under contract with Ohio State. He's weighing his options, and Ohio State tells him, according to this anonymous source, if you don't sign right now, you're not going to be able to come to the national championship celebration with your team. If Ohio State really wanted him to remain, I mean, come on. You know what somebody's going to do when you say that to him. They knew what was going to happen if that is in fact what they told him, which kind of makes me wonder if it's true. I don't know. I do think that if you are in the middle of a negotiation and you have that going on, like you're still an employee. If you're in the middle of a negotiation, if he's, going to make a counter offer, or if he's still mulling it over, you would still welcome him at the celebration, I would think. I mean, he hasn't told you he's leaving and going to Penn State. Now, once he says that, all bets are off. You don't want to invite him, whatever. You want to lock him out of the building at midnight, whatever. I mean, that's just what it is. You left and went to a rival after you just signed an extension. I don't care about your feelings at that point. But if they're still in the negotiations and you tell them you got to sign it by right now, or you're not welcome this weekend to the celebration, you know what the answer is going to be. So, how bad did they really want him back? My guess is Ryan Day was willing to work through this, whatever his issues were, and they pitched him the deal. And when it became clear that that he wasn't going to sign it immediately or wasn't happy with the deal, they said, "All right, you got till tonight to sign the thing, or you're not going to be welcome at the celebration." And I understand that from both parties' perspectives, to be honest. If I was Jim Knowles, the Larry Johnson situation would have been annoying, but he signed up for it. He knew what it was. And the coach breathing down your neck thing, that's what happens when you put out a subpar performance. It sounds really childish and gossipy to be irritated with that and then having someone talk about that on your behalf to a reporter. At any rate, sometimes relationships just end, and sometimes they end bad, and sometimes you're both a little right and both a little wrong. Seems to me like a situation where we can put a little bit of blame on everybody to go around here. It was a bad situation from the start to bring in a defensive coordinator and hamstring him. No doubt about that. But Knowles knew what he was getting into, and in the end, Ryan Day did the right thing after the Oregon game, made it work. They won a national championship, and now Knowles is happy at Penn State. Ryan Day is about to hire an excellent defensive coordinator, and we're going to get to see these guys play this year at Ohio Stadium. Let's hope it goes better than the rematch against Tony Alford in his first trip coming back to Ohio Stadium against Knowles. Anyway, that's all we got for this little update. Let me know your thoughts. Who was right? Who was wrong? Screw Jim Knowles. I'll talk to you guys later. JUCK and Bucks out.